Fragments of Silicon. The show must go on even when your third member isn't here. Mind you, I never said that was going to be witty, just I had something for the top. Anyway, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon, the Daylight Interviews. First one of these for the 15th season. Not from a lack of trying, but things get shuffled every now and again. Anyway, joining us this week, we got a pair of guests from, I guess, different organizations. Uncommon, but not unprecedented on the show. But anyway, this week we are welcoming Simon Ferrari, or is it Ferrari?
Yeah, like the car.
Okay, Simon Ferrari of AMC Games and Andrew Crenshaw of Thunkd Games.
Yeah, it's Crenshaw.
But
the rest of that was fine.
Actually every time I write an email to Andrew, I check to make sure that I did not accidentally write Crenshaw for some reason.
Sorry, that kind of threw off my train of thought. Right, so how we like to get started here is we like to get to know the people behind the games, behind the studio, behind all that stuff, and we start by asking this question. What got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Yes, so I'll jump in. I had an older brother. He was 4 years older than me, and I'm not the youngest person in the world. So we started playing video games right back in the day when, even before Pac-Man was out in the arcades, we were playing on home computers, ZX81s, home computers like that. So I've always had an interest in games, and that just kind of snowballed. I ended up doing a degree in fine art, and halfway through that course, I realised that I was spending more time playing Street Fighter on my Mega Drive, or Genesis, as you guys call it. So I started really looking into what I need to do to get into the industry, and that's it. That's how I broke in.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit younger than Andrew is. So my first video game experience was with the regular Nintendo, the Nintendo Entertainment System in the U.S. My dad, when I was 1 year old, my dad convinced my grandfather that I'd need a Nintendo eventually because he just wanted to play Zelda. And so my first video game experience was watching my dad play Zelda. And then when I was like 3, I was better at video games than him, so he quit. And I got into the video game industry actually through academia. I was planning on being a digital media professor for a long time, but I ended up not really loving teaching. I think teaching's great, obviously, but it just it didn't turn out to be the thing that I wanted to do. And actually, one of my students started a video game publishing label. And after they took my class, one of my classes at NYU, they invited me to work for them. And so that's how I got my first gig, actually working on games.
Definitely some different pathways, still leading to same industry, I guess. Anyway, so in your professional experience, what other jobs have you both had in the industry before, where you ended up?
So I've always worked on the development side. I started off as an artist. I've also taken roles on like a designer, project manager, producer, a bit of everything. Eventually, I've always worked for really small companies. That's something that I've deliberately aimed to do throughout my career. And I just like that's kind of small team mentality where everyone pitches in, everyone's got some kind of influence on the game and the thing you're making. And yeah, I've worked on all kinds of things. My first game was on PlayStation 1, and I worked on pretty much every console platform since then. Most recently, before I started Thunkd Games, I was working for the Chinese Room on games like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. And I just reached a point where I really wanted to do my own thing. So the only avenue left for me really was to set up my own company. That's why I set up Thunkd.
Okay.
And this is Simon. So my first game development gig was as a game design intern. That's what I thought I wanted to be when I was in school. At the time, a lot of the kind of big new thing in games was Facebook games, right? It was like maybe a year after Farmville had come out, and so all the games that I worked on were essentially, working in that Facebook game world. And while it was really good experience, it wasn't exactly the dream I had as a game designer to kind of work on that kind of stuff. And while I was an intern, I kind of realized that our producer that we had on the project, who was like an external producer from a publisher, I realized that they were making a lot of game design decisions for us, and I realized that in game design education, that wasn't really something that was communicated very well to students. The fact that producers inside your team and outside your team actually have a lot of influence on the general direction of where a game's design goes, and that kind of got me interested in teaching students more about the role of the game producer, and then also doing that myself. So some of the first production jobs I did were on premium mobile games, so way back before Apple Arcade, before free-to-play games really took over the platform of mobile. I worked on a couple of games called the biggest one I worked on was called Prune, which was a cool puzzle game where you trim a tree in order to make it grow in a certain direction to solve puzzles. And yeah, I kind of went from there to working more in publishing.
Okay. And continuing on from that delineation, how did you end up of all places AMC? And I suppose for our listeners out there, AMC Games here is attached to the television company, not the theater company.
Right. Yeah. I guess a lot of the people who are super into meme stocks these days, I guess, probably don't really know the difference between AMC Networks, which is the television network, and AMC Theaters or AMC Entertainment. So yeah, those are two different companies. Weirdly enough, even though they work in relatively similar spaces. The reason I work at AMC, it's pretty complicated. It's mostly a geographical reason, I'd say. I live in New York City, and there aren't actually a lot of video game companies here. Rockstar has an office here if you work in AAA, but if you work in kind of the hybrid, like media space, there's just not a lot of companies. And about 5 years ago, I was looking to get out of being an indie game producer and get more into the world of kind of like business and publishing, and this opportunity just came up. So most of what I work on is actually licensing and production on Walking Dead video games. But around 2 years ago, I told my bosses that I really wanted to get back into the world of indie games somehow, and they gave me permission to start funding and publishing, and that's how I got to where I am today.
So you're kind of the head of the AMC Games label then?
Yes, yeah. So I kind of do all the, I sign the projects and help scope them out. I kind of do everything except negotiate the deal itself, which my boss helps with because he's more ruthless than I am. Yeah, I just don't like dealing with legal stuff. So he kind of handles that. But yeah, so I scout the games. I interact with the developers to see if we're kind of a good personality fit and we have the same goals. And then I also kind of bring on the external, marketing and PR teams. And we have kind of an interesting situation in AMC where, we have kind of really cool marketing artists who work on our television shows, right? Like they make all the key art and the posters and, signage and stuff for our shows. And I'm able to kind of rent time with them and get their expertise and help on promoting these games. So it's kind of a really fun, even though we're, this massive company, the game projects are this kind of nice little mashup of people from, different backgrounds kind of coming together to help.
That is an interesting setup. And as far as to bring it around, how did you come across the magnificent truffle pigs here?
So after we released our first game I can't even remember now because of COVID. My perception of time is completely warped.
According to Steam, October.
It was last October, yeah. Yeah, so our first game, Airplane Mode, came out last October. And before that, before you publish your first game, most people don't know that you exist or that you're in the business of publishing games, right? And so that first game was kind of a New York City homegrown project. It was the guy, the lead designer, and actually the animator and the sound designer who worked on it, and the programmer, who were all my former students at NYU. So that was it was essentially like low-hanging fruit, right? Like I already, knew them. I knew of the project and loved it, and I had also helped them build the budget for it, and so it was really easy for me to know exactly, where the state of the game was and jump in as a publisher. So once that game came out, that's when people started reaching out to us that I didn't know before. And Andrew and I had interacted a little bit online before this, but when he found out, that we were publishing Airplane Mode, he reached out with this cool demo that was essentially the first day of the 5 days in the Magnificent Truffle Pigs, and the script for the game. And he showed both of those to me, and I was really kind of blown away by the story and the general look of everything, and especially the audio performance of Beth, played by Lucy Fish. I thought were all really kind of great, and that's how things got started.
And shifting over to Andrew here, how did you come to the idea of the Magnificent Truffle Pig? Because it's, if nothing else, a very unique game. I mean, certainly I've seen elements of other, narrative adventures. Firewatch comes to mind immediately, but I can't think of another first-person narrative metal detecting game out there.
Yeah, I like to think it's genre defining too. I mean, when you're kind of coming up with ideas for games and trying to design something, you can take all kinds of influences. I knew that I really wanted to make something that was about two people talking at the same time. And a lot of narrative games are about uncovering things from the past and them evoking memories and revealing storylines. And I'll be honest, that's kind of where Truffle Pig started. So the original idea for the game is that you would find items in the ground and they would reveal this story of something that happened in that place. And it was it felt okay, but it didn't feel, it didn't really have any sort of intimacy or liveliness around it, because everything was kind of buried away and static. But the thing I really did like was this interaction between the two characters. I don't think it'll surprise anyone that has ever come across a TV show called Detectorist, which is it's kind of a cult, gentle comedy from BBC in the UK, and that's again a TV show about two metal detectorists. But the thing it really is it's about their relationship and how they bounce off one another. So it seemed like a really good vehicle for telling a story. And of course, metal detecting is one of these things that doesn't really get done much in games. There are metal detecting simulators out there, so it felt like a nice little hook. And then as you dive into it and you start writing the story and you start writing the characters, then you realize that metal detecting is actually a really good metaphor for a lot of things that we wanted to get across in the story about uncovering things from the past and that relationship between luck and skill. So it kind of, it wasn't a light bulb moment where it all came in one big lump of an idea. It was something that gradually emerged and evolved.
And
I don't think that's been released over here, but it looks interesting.
It's probably on some streaming service. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was stuck in the back end of Netflix, for example, over here.
I suppose that's possible. You don't with video.
Yeah, I'm sure
it's
you
a
can
little bit
find
easier to do that. Yeah.
I mean, you'd be surprised what would be on the Netflix selection in terms of low budget international shows. Like Outback Truckers, anyone?
Yeah.
It's actually, I think for a while it was free on Amazon Prime if you were a Prime customer, but they took it off recently. So you can buy it there. And I think you can also, there's a SVOD service called Acorn TV, which is like all British TV all the time. And they have it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I would have also suggested BritBox, which is an actual streaming service of like just British television. I mean, but anyway, so how long did you develop the kernel of idea to full formation?
I'd say there was about 4 to 5 months of just kind of discovering really what I wanted to do, and that transition from it being a game that was just about metal detecting and finding stories from the past, and then it turning into this story of Beth and Adam. I'd say that was about 4 or 5 months, and then it was another 16 months, I guess, until release. I'm really hazy with dates. It's all been a bit of a mush, but yeah, that's kind of a timescale. Because it's our first game, we wanted to make something that was relatively short to make. The shorter it is, the less time there is for things to go wrong. So that was one of the drivers behind it.
Yeah, it's still a fairly ambitious game for your first affair. I mean, anything 3D from. I'm assuming you're a solo dev.
So I run Thunkd by myself, but over the course of the project, we've Laura Dawes has been our artist. She's incredible. She's done everything that you see in the game. And we've had David Smith, our programmer, we built the game in Unreal, which gives us a real good platform to build on. And I did a lot of the prototyping in Blueprints, and then he's come on board to unbreak all the things that I broke in Blueprints, which is a scripting language inside Unreal, and get all the performance together. And on top of that, we had Ollie doing sound design and Ziz and Danny doing production. But everyone apart from me was part-time on the project. But I guess it's kind of ambitious, but I think we've been really clever in the way that we've made stuff. So the other thing about metal detecting is that you tend to gravitate towards an area. So we didn't have to make expanses of miles and miles of world that you can cover. We kept it fairly tight. And the construct of it being on a farm is deliberate in that we can put people in fields so they can't just wander everywhere. So we made some smart design decisions, I think. But yeah, I mean, whether it's ambitious or not is up to other people to say, I guess.
Yeah, it's still a fairly small team, and you know, this is a pretty impressive first effort. Anyway, no, not a problem. Not a problem. Like, did you have anyone help you out with the writing? Because it is it's a profound shift to go from, just I guess, for like better term, straight metal detecting game to a narrative heavy focused affair, and you know, and also it's kind of hard to get into the actual story beats without going into spoilers. But we will attempt to dig as deep as we can. No puns, metaphors intended. But yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about it without going into spoilers. But yeah, I did the writing myself, but along the way I've had some good advice. A couple of script advisors, Anna and Karen, they read through the script, made sure that I'd got the tone right. I didn't want Adam to come across as someone who was mansplaining everything to Beth, but there had to be that kind of constructive criticism from him, I guess you could call it. And then other people have chipped in along the way, not least of all Simon. He's been really good at giving me advice on bits where it was kind of sticky and not quite flowing well, and just helping us smooth out those rough edges and rounding the script off.
Okay. And I suppose, one of the main things I wanted to get to in terms of the narrative is this based off of anyone, or is it all entirely fictionalized?
So it is fictionalized, but a lot of Beth is me, and kind of the way that when things are not going as smoothly as they could, how I kind of react to those and some of the traits that I saw in myself. But I think along with that, there is that element of what I really tried to do was tap into those kind of things everyone has, that kind of weariness about if they're deserving of success or if they've been lucky or unlucky. And but yeah, Beth is a lot of Beth is me.
And that's certainly an interesting spin on things. Was it, are you channeling any sort of particular instances or times of your life, or is it more general?
It's more general rather than specifics. Yeah, I think in retrospect, something, because it was the first game that I've completely written by myself, I do try to cram a lot of little things in there, things that I want to get off my chest, and but that they don't. I'm hoping that friends or family that play it don't kind of look at things and go, "Oh, is that me?" or "Is that in relation to this thing?" Because it is all fictionalized. And just a little bit of trivia. We've got Adam and Beth because I did a lot of A/B testing. I wasn't quite sure if we'd have a male and a female, or who would lead, or if we'd have two guys, two women. So I literally did A/B testing with the names, and those names kind of stuck.
Yeah, that's not that uncommon. I've just started up a game that's using a similar theming of A and B. Sometimes it's a C. But anyway, getting into the detecting part of the game, so in terms of the objects and the field, is that all handcrafted, or is this procedurally generated, or is it randomized, or is every playthrough, will you find the items in the exact same place every time?
So the fields, well, the treasure layout, if that's what we're talking about specifically, some of them, so the locations that you'll find them in will vary. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a method behind it where, from a practical point of view, we've got to make sure that there are things that people always find because they trigger critical beats within the story. And then there are things that you can find that are kind of bonus items that will give you a bit more background about Adam and Beth. And then there are some objects that are just in there for fun. But there is a system behind it. you're not guaranteed to find the same thing in the same place, but there's a lot of it's a systematic setup that's not completely freeform.
Okay. And further tying, the detecting to the narrative here, like, do you have to find objects to progress? Because, there does seem to be some sort of time factor going on here, because eventually you will break for lunch and end the day and all that stuff. And is that incumbent on finding objects, or does time just pass?
Yeah, we've got a kind of mixture of things going on. So finding things does trigger the timeline along. And there are occasions where if you don't find something, then the game will jump ahead. But we make sure that you never lose anything, you never miss anything that's critical to the story.
Okay. I'm also trying to figure out if this is a branching story. Like, if you don't find object X, plot point Y doesn't happen, and multiple endings and all that stuff.
There's a very definite ending, and that's a deliberate design choice. I think it makes sense once you've completed the game and you understand a little bit more about Beth. Again, that's trying to avoid too many spoilers.
Understandable.
So how I would describe it is that there's branches within the conversations. They tend to lead to very similar outcomes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would you say there is one ending, or are there multiple endings?
There's one definite ending.
Okay. And is there any sort of replay that you hear? Like, is there anything else to do after you've completed the narrative?
Yeah, so we do track the treasures that you found, and some of them are kind of time dependent, and there are things. So you can go back and you can play go back to play previous days and pick up some of those treasures that you haven't found. If you're one of those completists, you can go away and find everything. And there are things in the world that you can look at and take photographs of. So there's something to find if you missed it on the first playthrough.
Okay. So primarily
it is a narrative game. It is a story that we want to tell. So there's I think it's fair to say there's limited value in replaying, but I think people, once they've understood the story, probably want to go back and just maybe check a few things.
Are there going to be like dialogue changes and stuff that you can like see what would happen if you said the other thing or nothing? Thinking again of Firewatch, sorry.
So you can check out the different routes through the conversations. Like I said, they all lead to a very specific end to this story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess shifting a bit more back to the development side of things, you mentioned this game is Unreal. What made you pick that engine? Because it crops up from time to time, but usually when we get indie developers, small teams, they're working in Unity.
I guess the simplest answer to that is when I left the Chinese room, it was the engine that we did. We made Everybody's Gone to the Rapture in CryEngine, which has kind of slid off the scene a little bit. And then for the game that we did after that and the prototypes we were building when I left, we were using Unreal. So I was kind of skilled up, and it meant that I could go away and pretty much build out this whole prototype all by myself. I could use assets off a marketplace. I could do all the visual scripting to get all the game logic together. So it was kind of the tool I felt most comfortable with, that I had the most knowledge about, that I knew I could hit the ground running with.
Fair enough. Yeah, like I said, it's just so many Unity games.
Yeah. I mean, Unity's great. It's got. I think a lot of people can eke a lot of out of that engine, especially visually. But Unreal did everything that we needed it to do, so we were very happy with that.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. One interesting, I'm not sure if the word quirk or design choice. I suppose a couple of them is, was there any particular reason you made this first person as opposed to third person?
Yeah. Again, I think it's it was something that I wanted that immediacy, and for these conversations to happen, and then just from a practical point of view, we were such a tiny team that having characters on there, animating them, it would have increased our development time, our budget, all of those things. So yeah.
Fair enough, and I'm assuming that's also why there are no human. Like you can't actually see Adam or Beth. It's something I noticed. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
Again, it's there were design reasons behind that, but primarily the thing that took us down that avenue was the cost of it, and then it allows us to do things in the game as well that would have been trickier had we have had characters.
Fair enough. All right, I guess shifting gears once again to the audio side of things. How was the music and indeed the audio recording handled? Because I'm presuming this was all built during the pandemic.
Yeah, so I'll talk about VO, and then I'm not sure if Simon wants to come in about music or not. But with regards to the voiceover, when we were building the prototype, we used robot voices, these kind of auto-generated voices that you get that sound very robotic, and it really killed the atmosphere of the game. So we had a little bit
I
of
would
budget.
imagine that would.
Yeah, I've got videos of it somewhere, and it's awful. But we used some of our budget very sparingly, got some actors on board to do day one of the game, and it just lifted things massively. So as Simon said earlier, Lucy did the voiceover, and on our prototype, Lucy Fish, she was incredible. She just like nailed it. And I was still partway through writing the final draft, and I think that definitely changed the way that I wrote some of the lines. I just had her, imagined her talking in my head, and yeah, that really helped the writing no end. Simon, do you want to talk about Arthur?
Yeah, so Arthur had previously worked on a show for AMC Networks. So weirdly, AMC operates BBC America. So in the US, that's where you watch Doctor Who, right? And so, I think that role of Rory in Doctor Who is one of the ones that he's most well known for in the US. And when Andrew said that he was, looking for a voice actor for Adam, he shared kind of some of the notes on Adam's personality and similar characters in other media. And Rory from Doctor Who was on there. And so, I kind of like sent some emails around internally, and I was like, hey, does anybody know how to get in contact with actors who used to be on Doctor Who? And a couple emails later, somebody had that contact, and we reached out to him, and it was the first time that I've worked with a famous person, quote unquote famous person, who wasn't on The Walking Dead. We work with Walking Dead actors all the time because the show is still in active production, and we have really tight relationships with that show because we make it ourselves. And so I didn't really know what was going to happen. I didn't know if his agent would ever respond to us. I didn't know if he was interested in working on games. But he turned out to be really excited and lovely to work with. And it came together really quickly. I think he had one meeting where he met with Andrew, and they talked about the character and the story of the game. And then it went from there. And Yeah, I mean, I guess for the past roughly year and a half, most voice acting, unless you work at like a huge AAA studio, has been done remotely. And so voice actors from, the very top tier talent all the way down to, people who you can hire to do commercials and, really small sound bites. Everybody is basically equipped right now to record safely from their homes. And so I think that kind of that made it a lot easier for us to deal with actually than if the pandemic hadn't been happening.
True enough. True enough. Right. Anyway, so let's see here. How long ago was the game released to the marketplace?
It came out on Steam, 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, Andrew?
Mid-June.
Okay.
June 2nd is what Steam says.
Okay, so that's a fair clip amount of time for a game. How has it been faring in the marketplace thus far?
Pretty good. I think that Steam's, always hard to deal with. There's a lot of games that come out on Steam every single day, and there's, kind of trends in Steam that are more or less favorable to your particular, game and your genre, and the day you release it on, and the kind of general climate of what people are into. And so yeah, it's done well on Steam, and we are releasing imminently in just a couple weeks on Switch and Epic Game Store, and we're kind of hoping that we'll see it flourish on those platforms, especially Switch right now. A lot of indie developers are celebrating how rich and supportive the Nintendo community is to indie games. So that'll be my first time working on a Switch release, and I'm really excited to see how it does there.
Indeed, and is Andrew handling the Switch version, or has that been farmed out externally?
We're doing that internally. So David, our programmer, has had most of the headaches to deal with on that. Although Laura did do quite a lot of optimization work on the artwork. Obviously, it's not quite as powerful as a PC, but we've eked a lot out, and and Unreal does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to going cross-platform as well.
I mean, have there been any sort of compromises, major compromises that have had to be made with the game to get it on the Switch?
Not especially, no. It's the usual thing about optimization, just tweaking the amount of foliage, for example, you draw. But it's been it hasn't been as bad as I feared.
Well, that's not surprising to me because, looking at the game, it's not that intensive of a title. Plus, its pace is, fairly slow.
It's not a twitchy game, but we do show a lot of the world at the same time. Most games, you get a lot of occlusion because of walls and buildings, and so so yeah, that was one of the pinch points that we had to work through.
Indeed. And in terms of the Switch release, is it going to be digital only, or are you planning on any sort of physical release for the Switch?
Digital only at first. We are still very small publishers at AMC Games, and producing discs is, or I guess in the Switch's case, cartridges, is still a pretty major undertaking. And so, I kind of am hoping that if somebody likes it who does kind of limited edition physical releases, I'm hopeful that someone will reach out and kind of get on board to maybe do a cool limited edition someday with a metal detector plushie, and I don't know what else. Yeah, metal detector plushie.
Yeah,
That's what we
walkie-talkie.
want. That's what we want.
That does sound like something limited run games would put out. Right.
Yeah. Hashtag limited run games. Reach out.
And moving beyond the Switch, any plans for a PlayStation 4, Xbox One, or the current gen PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X? Any plans for those ecosystems?
Currently, PlayStation is a little bit outside our kind of scope for developing on. We would need to hire externals for that, and so it's not currently in the plans. But depending on how the Switch release goes, it's definitely something that we'd consider. Yeah.
Okay. And Xbox?
Xbox again is kind of in the same boat as PlayStation. I guess it wouldn't be quite as expensive as PlayStation, but we would need similarly, right? We would need an external team to do the porting, and it's just it's a little bit too big for us right now.
Fair enough. That does seem to be the state of prioritization in the indie scene. It's like PC, Switch, and then if you can, the Xbox and PlayStation families. And I guess getting back to the PC, Epic Game Store, have you been having to do any sort of additional work, adjustments for that marketplace? I gotta admit, I don't know too much about it.
Yeah, the changes don't really affect the game. They're all kind of back-end stuff, like how it plugs into their system and achievements and those kind of things. So it's brand new to us. It's brand new to Simon as well. So we're still figuring the last few bits out. But essentially, it's the same game. It's just some of the back-end stuff that changes.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, as far as publishing goes, it's pretty similar to Steam. Obviously, the Epic Game Store it's like a curated collection. So you can't just sign up to be on Epic. And so I would say the one cool thing about it is you do have kind of a more personal relationship with the store. There's like a really big helpful team at Epic who kind of helps onboard you to how the platform works and gives you advice on, the best way to get your game out in front of people. So yeah, it's been really fun and nice working with them. I'm excited to see how it does.
I suppose along those lines, have you looked into bringing the Magnificent Truffle Pigs to GOG?
Yeah, I think once the dust settles from Epic and Nintendo, I'll look into GOG and itch, and then also there's a couple kind of PC game platforms that are region specific, like that are only available in Korea or only available in Japan.
Right.
And so that's kind of the next wave of platforms we hope to support.
Fair enough. And in terms of PC builds, is this game available on Windows, or are there also versions for Mac and Linux?
There's no plans right now for Mac or Linux. And Windows, I think that's a publishing question, but I don't think we've got any plans right now.
Oh, like the Windows Store. Yeah, I actually hadn't thought about that. That's a good call. I should add that to the list. Thank you.
Indeed. I guess there's another platform out there called Vox Pop, which is fairly new. They've got their own thing going on there. And let's see. Now, I've also noticed that Sundance TV was attached to this in some fashion, but I'm trying to figure out exactly what they did here.
Yeah, so the way that AMC Games is set up is, basically I'm an employee of AMC Networks generally. I'm not attached to one of the specific networks. So something that a lot of people don't know is that AMC operates a whole bunch of different channels, right? So I mentioned Sundance TV earlier, or sorry, I mentioned BBC America earlier. But we also operate Sundance TV and the Sundance Film Festival. We also operate IFC TV, which is like the channel that Portlandia and Documentary Now come out of, and the IFC Film Center and IFC Films, like this massive indie film production company or distributor, and also WeTV, which is a reality television network, as well as a bunch of different kind of digital services like Shudder, which is all horror. So when we sign a game, we attach one of the network brands to it. So for Truffle Pigs, Sundance TV does a lot of interpersonal dramas, and it does a lot of British programming in the US. And so we figured it was a really good fit for Truffle Pigs to kind of do that co-branding. And most of what they help with is the marketing. They also actually did a bunch of on-air support. If you watch Sundance TV regularly, you may have seen some Truffle Pigs commercials on there, and some sponsored runs of Law and Order actually, which was kind of a fun thing to work on. But yeah, that's kind of what they do. Basically, when we're doing the trailers, we kind of work with Sundance TV producers and writers to kind of craft those. And yeah, it's kind of a really fun little tiny working group with them. Yeah, so that's how they helped.
Yeah, one of the fun things for me about working with a publisher that is attached to a TV movie entity was the trailer side of things. So we did a air quote traditional trailer, but we also did a live action one, which was a lot of fun. Don't know if you saw that, but yeah, that was something that I haven't done before in my career.
I guess another question along these lines is there any chance to see a Magnificent Truffle Pigs TV series or film or something of that nature?
So it is something that we do in the, I guess, to get into the the kind of weird business side of things. It's something that we build into the contracts that we basically have the right to pitch Andrew if we want to make a TV show, essentially, is how it works. And while there aren't currently any plans, we do have a bunch of people at AMC who work on stuff like who work on physical merchandise. We have people who work on comic books, obviously TV shows and podcasts. And so I have kind of regular sync ups with them to see what kind of opportunities are available. And yeah, I really hope that someday we get to do our first comic book adaptation or board game or maybe even someday a TV show. But TV shows are a whole different world, and it's not really my expertise. And so yeah, it's something that we'd like to do in the future, but it's definitely a big undertaking.
Maybe a Truffle Pigs podcast to start out.
Yeah, just do a awesome little metal detecting podcast. It would be really fun.
Yeah. Anyway, so we are running low on time, so just a few more questions. And, well, I suppose my final question at this juncture is, can you talk about what might be coming next from both of your camps?
Yeah, I'll go first. So we're already prototyping our next project. It's still really early days. Still going to be a narrative game, but there's a little bit more, let's call it criminality in this one. And that's about as much as I can say right now.
I actually haven't even seen what Andrew's working on next. I'm excited to see what it is. Yeah, from the AMC game side, we are a couple months away from announcing what our third game is. But it's one that we started working on the publishing side the same time that we did with Truffle Pigs, but it is a little bit bigger, and so it's taken longer to get to that kind of announcement phase. But it's pretty cool, but I don't want to spoil anything yet. So
It's understandable. All right. I'll see if my colleagues here have any more questions for you.
I think all mine have been answered. I don't think this has been asked, but I did miss a bit of the show. Was there any thoughts of doing a VR version?
It's something that we contemplated, especially when it was the earlier version of the game that was very much just about metal detecting. But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay, no, I'm not exactly excited about the idea. I was just curious since it's first person.
Yeah, it's something that we considered, but there are parts of the game that wouldn't quite work, and so yeah, that it's unlikely to happen. And besides, without getting into too much politics, the world of VR it's still hard to make money out of it unless you get one of those big platforms involved.
Yeah, I was mostly just thinking like the scenery is pretty, so having walk around in VR might be nice, but
yeah, we could do a VR mode, I guess, where it's just a sightseeing mode, because it's all based on countryside that's about 5-10 minutes away from where I live. So I see this stuff all the time.
Okay. Petty?
I think all my questions have been answered.
Did you catch that?
no, Petty, you're too quiet.
Is this better?
That is question.
Yes.
Yeah, my questions have been answered.
Okay. I suppose, actually, I came up with one final question. Where did you come up with the title of the Magnificent Truffle Pigs?
So Truffle Pig was something that was in the script, a nickname that Beth's dad gave her, and we'd been sitting around literally since the start of the project coming up with terrible names for the game. I'm terrible at naming things anyway, but yeah, I think it was Clayton at AMC kind of hooked onto this word Truffle Pigs, and then it was just a case of what wrapper do we put around it, and I think Simon came up with the final mix. So I can't take any credit from that, but it's a name that seems to have resonated with people.
Yeah, it's a play on the there's an old Orson Welles movie called The Magnificent Ambersons, which is about the kind of decline of this grand family. And so yeah, it's not something we've talked about a lot, but I kind of wanted to, number one, there's like the kind of surface meaning of the title, which is like, that these people are have this Truffle Pigs nickname, and they have this kind of bright past, right, of this happy time they had when they were younger doing metal detecting. But then for people who were kind of more familiar with the Magnificent Ambersons, or with the title like Royal Tenenbaums is also a play on this, right? I wanted to hint at the kind of fact that Beth was going through a dark time, or a something of a decline in her life that needed to be addressed through the game. So yeah, that's where it came from.
Okay. Oh, well, it appears we are just out of time, and I want to thank you both for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today. It was a lovely conversation, and hopefully we can have you, either one or both of you, back on the program whenever your next projects are ready to be talked about.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, this. I'd love to talk again. I'm not sure when we can talk about the next thing, but yeah, happy to come back.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I'd love to come back when we're ready to talk about the next one.
All right. Right, so in the meantime, the game is The Magnificent Truffle Pigs. It is currently available on Steam. When is the Switch release date?
Has not been announced yet, but it's in a couple weeks.
Okay. Coming in a few weeks. It clocks in at $11.99. Be sure to pick it up on Steam, or if you want to wait for the Switch version, that can also work. I don't know if it's available for pre-order yet on the eShop.
It is not. No, yeah, no pre-order yet for Epic or for Switch.
Okay. But still, you can pick the game up on those platforms in not too much of an amount of time. But with that, we must end this session of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to tune in next time on the Sunday reviews. Until then, I shall wish you good gaming.